Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're diving into something that gets talked about a lot, but isn't always super clear, the different roles within product management.
Right.
You hear product manager, right? But what does that actually mean day to day? Are they all doing the same thing?
Not quite. And that's what we want to unpack.
Yeah, we're going to explore these specializations. We've got some great material that really helps clarify who does what when it comes to actually bringing products to life.
Exactly. And, whether you're maybe thinking about a product career or perhaps you work with product teams and just want to get a better handle on their different functions.
Or maybe you're just curious, like, how does this stuff actually happen?
Yeah. How does an idea become, a thing you can use? This chat should hopefully give you some real clarity. We'll dig into the nuances, aiming for those aha moments.
Cool. And we're basing this on a resource that outlines these common roles you see in different companies.
That's right.
Okay, let's get into it. Starting with, I guess, the most fundamental one, the core product manager. At its heart, what are we talking about here? What's the essence of this role?
Well, okay, at its absolute core, the product manager, just that plain title, is fundamentally responsible for the success of, one or more products. Pretty straightforward, really.
Like it.
But the really fascinating part is where they operate. They kind of sit in this space between the market and the organization itself.
Between market and organization, like a bridge.
Exactly. Think of it like that. It's a real boundary role.
Yeah.
They're right at that intersection.
Okay, a boundary role. What does that mean in practice? What are they actually doing there?
Well, there's essentially the conduit. They're channeling what the market needs into the company. So they have to really deeply understand what customers want, what they need, maybe what they don't even know they need yet.
Right.
And then they have to turn around and work inside the organization to make sure the company can actually build it, deliver it, support it. It's this constant balancing act.
Balancing customer wants and what the company can actually do.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And as our source material points out, they're really key in maximizing the return on investment, the ROI for products and services, across their whole life cycle.
The whole life cycle, so not just launch day.
No. From cradle to grave, so to speak. So I guess a key insight here is that this product manager title, it's often an umbrella. The core PM is like the central conductor, trying to keep everything in harmony, balancing all these demands.
Without necessarily having direct control.
That's a huge part of it, which means they need exceptional communication skills, persuasion. It's crucial if you're thinking about stepping into that kind of foundational role.
Got it. So they're thinking about the product from concept all the way through to maybe retirement.
Absolutely. And a really big piece of that is product planning. The core PM is often driving this ongoing process of figuring out and clearly articulating the market requirements.
Market requirements. So what the market actually needs or wants for a specific area or problem.
Exactly.
Okay. So they figure out what the market wants. How do they actually do that? How do they uncover those desires?
This is where they really earn that title, voice of the customer. They actively go out and find those unmet needs.
How? Like practically?
It often means initiating and actually participating in customer visits, setting up advisory panels to get direct feedback, conducting really in-depth customer interviews.
So getting out of the building.
Definitely. It's all about gathering that raw, unfiltered information directly from the source. And once they have that, they can lead the charge in, say, improving existing products or guiding the development of completely new ones.
That sounds like a massive amount of responsibility. Do they, manage all the teams involved? Do they have direct authority?
And here's where it gets really interesting. Often, no, not direct authority. Yeah, our source actually brings up Gamel and Williman, who pointed this out way back. Product managers are frequently held responsible for the total profit of their products.
Okay, stakes.
But they often lack direct authority over the very units they depend on. Think about it. Sales, marketing research, manufacturing, R&D, even advertising.
Wow, okay, so how do they get anything done?
Influence, negotiation, persuasion. Their success absolutely hinges on their ability to influence effectively. They have to build support, build consensus, find alternative ways to get their initiatives moving forward.
Okay, so a major insight. It's less about command and control.
Much less.
And more about collaboration and, convincing people.
You got it. Influence without direct authority, it's tricky, but it's absolutely essential.
Definitely a key skill. Now, the source also mentions a specific type, the market-facing product manager. How's that different from this core role we've been discussing?
Right. So the market-facing PM has a very, very specific external focus. They are primarily managing products that are sold to or used by external customers, people outside their own company.
Okay, so less internal focus, more outward looking.
Exactly. Their main job is to work super closely with these external customers to really understand and, importantly, uncover their unmet needs.
So even more direct customer interaction, perhaps.
Generally, yes. They spend a significant amount of time doing market research, specifically aimed at identifying those unmet needs, and then critically articulating the needs of a particular target market or customer segment.
And you mentioned distinguishing this from product marketing.
Yes, that's important. We'll get to product marketing later, but the market-facing PM is focused on figuring out what product to build, driven by that direct customer insight.
Gotcha. What to build, not necessarily how to sell it yet.
Precisely. They're thinking about things like the intended demographics, what the competitors are up to, and crucially, how any potential new product fits into the company's bigger strategic picture.
Strategic fit, okay.
Ultimately, all that market intelligence they gather, that's the fuel for creating the right products for those external customers. So the key takeaway, the market-facing PM is the champion for those external users inside the organization.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay, so what about the flip side, the internal product manager? The name kind of gives it away, I guess.
It does. You've hit the nail on the head there. Unlike the market-facing folks, the internal PM's customers are inside the organization.
Internal teams.
Yep. Often, the products they manage are actually components or platforms that are used to build the larger market-facing products.
Can you give an example?
Sure. Think about a tech company. You might have an internal PM who manages the core user authentication system, or maybe a critical shared database, or an internal analytics platform.
Ah, okay.
Well,
Stuff that isn't sold directly.
Exactly. It's not sold directly to external customers, but it's absolutely essential for creating value in the products or services that are marketed externally. So their customers are the other internal teams, engineering, data science, maybe other product teams who rely on these internal products to do their jobs and build the final customer offering.
Interesting. So their success impacts the external products indirectly.
Absolutely. The success of an internal PM directly impacts the efficiency, the quality, maybe even the features of those external-facing products. Understanding the needs of their internal users is totally paramount for them.
Okay, internal versus external focus. Got it. Now, another term that stands out is technical product manager. What's their specialization?
So the technical product manager, or TPM, brings a really deep understanding of the technology side of a product.
Deep tech knowledge.
Exactly. They often partner very closely with the market-facing product managers. They help bridge that gap between what the market needs and what's actually technically feasible to build.
Bridging market needs and engineering reality.
You got it. And because of that, you'll often find them spending a good chunk of their time supporting their colleagues, especially the engineering team, helping them understand the requirements, the constraints, the why behind the tech choices.
So they need to speak both languages in a way, market language and engineer language.
That's a perfect way to put it. That translation skill is key. How do you take sometimes fuzzy market needs and turn them into concrete technical specs that engineers can actually work with?
Right. Sounds challenging.
It is. It requires not just that technical depth, but also really strong communication skills, being able to explain complex technical stuff to non-technical people and vice versa.
So what are their specific tasks? What might they be responsible for?
Often it includes creating very detailed descriptions of product features, helping prioritize those features based on technical complexity or dependencies, mapping out use cases, defining system and performance requirements.
Pretty granular stuff.
Very granular. Even things like sales and support requirements from a technical angle. And sometimes they might get involved in developing market test plans, again, focusing on the technical aspects.
Okay. So a key insight for the TPM is that they ensure the what from the market can actually become a functional how in the product.
Beautifully put. That's the core of it.
All right. Moving along, we have the service product manager. This sounds like it applies to a specific kind of offering, not necessarily software or hardware.
It does, exactly. Service PMs are typically in market-facing roles, similar to the general market-facing PM we discussed. But their focus is specifically on managing an organization's services rather than tangible goods.
Like consulting or support or maybe financial services.
Could be any of those, yeah. Their scope covers, really, the whole service experience, everything from how the service is positioned in the market, the quality of that customer experience, the actual delivery mechanics, and even the pricing strategy.
So the entire service is the product for them.
Precisely. They treat that whole offering as the product they manage.
Got it. Now let's shift gears slightly to the product marketing manager. This role often comes up alongside product manager, but it's distinct. What's the key difference here? How does this role come about?
Yeah, the product marketing manager, or PMM, often emerges as a company starts to grow and scale. There's usually an increased focus on the go-to-market activities.
Go-to-market, like launch and sale.
Exactly. Launch, sales enablement, ongoing market communication. So it often becomes a way to sort of divide up the product lifecycle.
Divide the life cycle. How so?
Well, traditionally, one PM might have handled everything. But with this specialization, you often see the core product manager retaining responsibility for the pre-launch activities, defining the product, understanding the market need, getting it built.
Okay, the what's and why.
Right. And then the product marketing manager steps in and takes ownership of the post-launch activities.
The how to sell it and keep selling it part.
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
The expectation is that the PMM will have really strong skills in things like customer acquisition, messaging, positioning, and overall market engagement activities. You could maybe think of it like the PM is focused on bringing the product into the world,
Getting it built.
and the PMM is focused on bringing the product to the world.
Getting it noticed and bought. Okay, that helps clarify.
Yeah, and our source makes a useful distinction here. It says, think of product management and product marketing as processes or functions,
Right.
whereas product managers and product marketing managers are the roles, the people doing specific tasks within those processes. It helps focus on what individuals actually do.
So what are the core functions of that PMM role?
A major function is defining and managing the product's image out there in the market. This includes things like planning and executing the product launch, building awareness among potential customers, and crucially, supporting the sales team so they can effectively sell it.
Sales enablement, right. Training, materials.
All of that. They're essentially crafting the narrative around the product,
Yeah.
defining its promise to the customer, and then making sure that promise is delivered effectively through the launch, through sales training, through channel programs if they exist.
Okay, so they own the messaging and the market execution.
Exactly. But what's also fascinating and really important is their position after launch.
Oh.
Because they're so involved in the market engagement, the PMM is often in a unique position to see how customers are actually reacting to the product in the real world.
Gathering that post-launch feedback.
Yes. Direct feedback, market reaction, adoption rates, maybe competitive responses. This real-world intel is incredibly valuable.
And what do they do with it?
They bring it back. They provide that input to the product managers. It informs future iterations, maybe identifies needed improvements, or even sparks ideas for the next major release.
So that feedback loop between PMM and PM is critical.
Absolutely crucial. It's a key insight for ensuring ongoing product success and evolution. It shouldn't be a one-way street.
Makes total sense. Okay, now let's look at product portfolio managers. The name suggests something broader than a single product.
You're right on track. Product portfolio manager is really an umbrella term. This person is responsible for managing a whole grouping of related products.
A portfolio, like in finance.
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
These products are often organized into logical portfolios, maybe based on a specific business line or a market segment the company serves.
And how does their focus differ from an individual product manager?
They operate at a much higher level. Unlike an individual PM who's deep in the weeds of features and specs for one product, the portfolio manager is looking across the entire group. They're focused on things like overall investment strategy for that portfolio. Should we invest more here, less there? They think about diversification across the products, managing the overall risk profile of that group.
So much more strategic, less tactical feature stuff.
Definitely. Less about the specifics of a product, more about the strategic business implications of the entire product line or group.
What else falls under their purview?
They're often also involved in managing the company's intellectual property IP related to those products, things like patents and trademarks within their portfolio.
Okay.
And importantly, they often have significant authority, working closely with senior management, legal, finance teams. They can make big decisions.
Like what kind of decisions?
Decisions about whether to, say, buy a new company to add to the portfolio, or maybe sell off a product line, transform an existing one, divest a struggling product, or even retire older products completely.
Wow. Okay, so buy, sell, transform, retire. Big picture stuff.
Very big picture. It's a highly strategic role with a major impact on the company's overall direction and financial health.
Definitely sounds high level. Okay, the last couple of roles we have here relate to the idea of a product owner. The source talks about this both outside of Scrum and within Scrum. Let's start with the product owner. Outside of Scrum, what's their deal?
Right. So outside of the specific Scrum framework, which we'll get to, the product owner role is often seen as essentially a subset of the broader product management responsibilities we've discussed.
A subset. Focused on what?
Their primary focus is really on representing the business stakeholders and the customer within the development process itself. Their goal is ensuring the thing being built will actually be successful and meet the needs.
Representing business and customer to the developers.
Exactly. They're the ones tasked with capturing the detailed market requirements and, crucially, the specific acceptance criteria for a project or feature. What does done actually look like from a user perspective? They then take all these requirements and prioritize them. And this is key. They often have to make the tough trade-off decisions, balancing features versus function versus hitting a deadline.
Features, function, time, the classic triangle.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
So they really act as that voice of the business and the voice of the customer for the development team during the build phase.
And how do they interact with the teams?
They work very closely with the development team, reviewing the requirements, clarifying functional specs, and they're often interact directly with customers or end users during development to get feedback and make sure the product is really hitting the mark.
So bridging that gap during the build.
Precisely. And interestingly, our source notes that in some organizations, especially those with a well-established PO structure, but maybe not full Scrum, these product owners might also take on tasks that traditionally belong to PMs.
Like what?
Things like developing the initial business case, creating release plans, maybe even owning parts of the product roadmap.
So the lines can definitely blur depending on the company structure.
They really can. It highlights how these roles aren't always rigidly defined boxes. The responsibilities can be quite fluid.
Good point. Okay, so that's the PO concept generally. Now let's specifically talk about the product owner and Scrum. How does this role fit into that specific methodology?
Right. So Scrum, as you know, is this really popular iterative and incremental process for building products, especially software.
Yep. Sprints and all that.
Exactly. Within the Scrum framework, the product owner is one of three very clearly defined roles. You have the product owner, the Scrum Master, and the development team members.
Okay, one of the core three.
And the product owner in Scrum has a very specific, very crucial responsibility: maximizing the business value of the work that the Scrum development team produces.
Maximizing business value. How?
They are, in essence, the primary advocate for both the business goals and the customer needs within that specific development process. And importantly, they usually have significant authority to guide the team's efforts toward that value.
And they manage that famous artifact, the product backlog, right?
Yes, absolutely. Scrum specifically empowers the product owner as the single accountable person responsible for managing the product backlog.
The big to-do list for the product.
Kind of, yeah. It's a prioritized list of all the requirements, features, fixes, everything needed for the product, typically written as user stories. And having that single point of authority is really important. It helps prevent the development team from getting pulled in different directions by conflicting priorities.
So the PO owns the backlog and decides the order?
Yep. Within the Scrum framework, it's the PO who decides what gets built and in what sequence to maximize that value delivery.
Okay, so how do they decide? What goes into that prioritization?
Well, they need to apply their knowledge of the market, of the customer, of the company's overall business objectives. It's not just gut feeling.
Right.
They also need to collaborate closely with the development team to understand the technical effort involved, maybe the risks associated with certain features. That helps them make informed decisions, looking for that best risk-adjusted return on the development effort.
So value versus effort and risk.
Exactly. And it's not done in isolation. The PO also has a responsibility to share and socialize this product backlog with the wider organization.
Yeah.
Get input from other departments, build consensus around the plan.
So communication and stakeholder management are big parts of it too.
Huge parts. You can't just dictate the backlog from an ivory tower.
Makes sense. And the Scrum product owner role has some pretty specific, almost daily responsibilities, right?
It does. It's very hands-on. Beyond just managing and prioritizing the backlog list, they're heavily involved in what's called grooming the user stories.
Grooming.
Yeah, basically preparing them so they're ready for the development team to work on. This means clearly explaining the business reasons behind each story, why it's valuable, and helping to define the acceptance criteria, how we'll know it's done correctly.
Getting the requirements crystal clear.
Exactly. They also need to collaborate regularly, like daily, with the development team. Be readily available to answer questions, clarify requirements as they come up during a sprint, and they need to inspect the work once it's completed by the team.
Inspecting the output.
Right. And finally, they actively participate in all the key Scrum events like sprint planning, the sprint review where work is demonstrated, and sometimes the retrospective.
Wow, okay. It really is a very involved collaborative role right there in the development cycle.
Absolutely. Very hands-on.
So who typically fills this Scrum product owner role in practice? Is it always someone with product owner in their title?
Not necessarily.
Yeah.
It really can vary depending on the context. In companies building commercial software, for instance, it's often a product manager or maybe a technical product manager who takes on the PO responsibilities within the Scrum team.
Okay.
But you might also see business analysts doing it, or maybe even sales engineers,
Sure.
especially if they have deep customer insight. Sometimes people with other titles step up if they have the right skills and knowledge.
And what about for internal projects, like building an internal IT system?
There, it could still be a product manager, but maybe more often it's a business analyst, or potentially even a department head from the business unit that needs the system. Someone who deeply understands the internal user needs.
So it's less about the title and more about having the right skills and proximity to the need.
I think that's a great way to put it. The core skills required strong communication, prioritization abilities, stakeholder management, understanding value. Those are valuable across many roles.
Right. Now, you mentioned Scrum scaling. What happens to the product owner role when companies use Scrum across many teams for bigger products? Does it change?
It often does, yes. As companies have scaled Scrum frameworks like LeSS or SAFe or others to handle much larger, more complex development efforts involving multiple teams,
Yeah.
they often implement some kind of product owner hierarchy.
A hierarchy, like layers of POs.
Sort of. At the top, you might find someone called a chief product owner or a similar title. This person is often at a director or VP level and holds the ultimate responsibility for the overall product's ROI and strategic success across all the teams.
Okay, the strategic overseer.
Exactly. And then reporting into them or working alongside them, you'll have other product owners who are responsible for specific products or maybe specific feature areas or components within the larger system. Each PO focuses on maximizing value for their specific area, aligned with the chief PO's overall vision.
Ah, that makes sense for coordination, like a leadership structure for the product ownership function itself.
Precisely. It helps maintain that strategic alignment when you have lots of teams working concurrently.
Got it. But what about in organizations that maybe use Scrum but don't have that formal PO hierarchy? How does a Scrum product owner typically interact with, say, a traditional product manager if both roles exist?
That's a common scenario.
Yeah.
In those cases, the Scrum PO and the product manager usually need to work very, very closely together. It becomes a partnership.
How do they divide the work?
Often, the Scrum product owner focuses more on the iteration level, the
Yeah.
tactics. What are we building in this sprint? What are the immediate priorities for the development team? They own that sprint backlog execution.
Okay, focused on the current development cycle.
Right. While the product manager often maintains that broader, more strategic view, they're typically focused on the overall product release strategy, the longer-term product roadmap, maybe market positioning, and the bigger business goals.
So PO on the iteration, PM on the release and roadmap.
That's a common and effective split. It becomes this collaborative relationship where the PO is ensuring the day-to-day, sprint-to-sprint development efforts are constantly aligning with the PM's broader strategic vision and roadmap.
And communication must be absolutely critical there.
Oh, totally. Constant, clear communication is key in those scenarios to make sure there's no disconnect between the tactical execution happening in the sprints and the overarching product strategy.
Wow, this has been incredibly insightful. We've covered a lot of ground, a lot of different flavors of product roles.
We really have.
So to try and wrap things up, what's the main thing you hope our listeners take away from all this? What's the key takeaway?
I think the most important thing to understand, really, is that the whole product management landscape is far from monolithic.
Right.
It's not just one job description.
Right.
There's this really diverse range of specialized roles, and each one caters to different needs, different parts of the product life cycle, different organizational structures.
So many different hats.
Exactly. And recognizing these distinctions, understanding who focuses on what, It just provides a much clearer, much more accurate picture
Yeah.
of how products were actually conceived, developed, launched, and managed over time.
Yeah, hopefully this has provided that clarity we were aiming for, maybe some of those aha moments for people listening.
That's the goal. Understanding the who does what can make collaboration smoother and just gives you a better appreciation for the whole process.
Absolutely. It definitely makes you appreciate the complexity involved.
And maybe, just to leave you with a final thought to chew on, consider how all these different roles we've talked about, the core PM, the market-facing one, the technical, the PMM, the POs, how they might actually interact and collaborate in a real-world scenario. Imagine them working together to bring a successful product, maybe one you use every day, to you, the end user.
Yeah, like mapping out those handoffs and dependencies.
Exactly. What kind of communication, what level of shared understanding would be absolutely crucial for that whole complex dance to work effectively?
That's a great point. It really highlights how interconnected they all are, even with the specializations. It's not just silos.
Not at all, or at least it shouldn't be. Thinking about those connections really gives you a new appreciation for the journey a product takes.